Hello, my name's Quinton Dalton. For those who don't know me, I'm one half of Stand 2 Games and co-author of Over Malvern Hills with Adrian McWalter. In our ACW game, Over Malvern Hill, we have units of infantry, cavalry and artillery. Infantry, which makes up the majority of most battles, is represented by the battalion. Here we have a regular Confederate infantry battalion of 1862. This battalion has a fatigue score of 9. This means it can take 9 fatigue hits before it is removed from the table. These fatigue hits are accrued throughout the game when the unit moves in terrain, fights or shoots or suffers adverse morale. Fatigue hits that a unit suffers can also be rallied off during the game by a commander. Here we have the brigade commander. The brigade commander has a set of stats. These are his command range, his control factor and his inspiration factor. Provided the battalion to be rallied is within his command range, he can attempt to rally a number of fatigue hits from the battalion up to his control factor. In this instance, the Confederate commander has a control factor of 4. This means he can take up to 4 10-sided dice and roll less than the battalion's current fatigue score. For example, if the battalion had suffered 5 fatigue hits, it would leave it on a factor of 4. Therefore, the commander would need to roll 4 or less on each dice. Each success would remove 1 fatigue. This roll is affected by his inspiration. As our commander is inspirational to a +1, he would need to roll 5 or less. Units in the game can also form different formations. The standard fighting formation being the close order line. For operating in rougher ground, woods, etc., we have a formation called open line. An open line is when the bases of the unit are split by half a base width each. The other formation that is most often used is what we call the column of 4s, which looks like this. This is particularly a manoeuvre formation. It can fight, but not very well. In front of me here you can see the tools needed to play over Malvern Hill. We have a selection of tiddlywinks which we use to record fatigue on units. We have small cotton wool balls that we use to indicate that the unit's fired. We have our D10 which we use to determine everything about the game. We have the D6s in case we choose to use the D6 option, which is in the back of the rule book. We have our trusted tape measure, and for recording army fatigue you can use your pen and paper or one of our fatigue boards. This is my Spanish fatigue board from Over the Hills, the Napoleonic game, but there will be specific ones for Over Malvern Hill too. The Confederate 1862 Army List from the new Stand 2 Games publication, Over Malvern Hill, Rules for the American Civil War. I'm just going to pick a small army using this list. The list is made up for 300 points generally, but as we're only playing on a small table today, we're going to use 150 points. When we use 150 points, we simply halve the minimums and maximums required. Okay, here we have the Confederate army list that we've picked to fight today's engagement battle and give you an idea of how the game plays. Fortunately, in my setup, I can use state flags to represent the quality of units, so I know which ones are which. In this instance, we have 3 Texas battalions who are being regular troops today. We have 2 South Carolina battalions, who are the veterans. And finally, 2 Mississippi battalions, who are both trained. We paid for our Army General and 3 brigade commanders. In addition to the infantry, we are playing with 2 batteries of 12-pounder Napoleon smoothbores and 1 unit of irregular cavalry with mounted and dismounted figures. His opponents, being the Union, we have an equivalent points value of troops. 9 battalions of infantry, which is made up of 1 notable unit, 2 veteran, with 3 regulars, all decked out as Irish Brigade, and 3 trained battalions. There's no cavalry with the Union side, but they do have 2 batteries of rifled artillery, and 2 battalions have paid for specialist sharpshooters. I'd like to speak to you about brigade and brigade fatigue, brigade morale. Here we have our regular Texas brigade, consisting of 3 battalions of infantry and 1 battery of artillery. Each battalion is worth 9 fatigue points. The battery is worth 7. This gives us a total of 34 fatigue for the brigade. We work out the brigade break point by halving that number and adding 1 to it. This gives us a break point of 18. As the brigade accumulates fatigue from all the reasons mentioned, moving, fighting, shooting, we move the peg down for each fatigue received until it reaches 0, at which point the brigade is considered to be broken. Now we've got our army sorted out for our pickup game today, and we move to deployment. Normally in a pickup game we'll be deploying 12 inches onto the table, and this is affected by your scouting total. In the instance today, your scouting total for the Confederates is made up of your general army commander's command factor, which in this case is 4, and he gets an additional 4 for having an irregular cavalry unit, making a total of 8. On the Union side, with having no cavalry, they just have their Commander-in-Chief's control factor, which in this case is 3. To each of these scores is added the roll of a d10. After rolling the dice, the Union commander rolled a good 9, added to his 3, made a total of 12. Confederate commander rolled a 6, added to his 8, makes 14, giving a difference of +2 to the Confederacy. This would allow the Confederate player to deploy up to 14 inches onto the table, with the difference being the number of difference in the dice. Due to the effective outscouting of the Union force, it would also allow the Confederate player, if he chose to make a flank march. These are the troops deployed for today's battle. The irregular Confederate cavalry is missing. Hopefully this will arrive at some point on a flank and be a nice surprise for the Union commander. I'd now like to speak about the turn sequence used in over Malvern Hill. It's really not an I go, you go. Our turn sequence works in a cyclical way. Side A would move all his units. Side A would rally any units that need rallying from any movement causes or any previously scored fatigue hits. Should Side A be moving into combat contact anywhere, Side B would fire his defensive fire first, before going back to Side A, who would then conclude the close combat. Side B would then fire any other units prior to moving themselves. They then rally before Side A fires any defensive fire, before going right back around to Side A moving again. As you can see, it's a cyclical process and each turn flows into the other. Here you can see the first move that's been made by my Texas Brigade. The front regiment has crossed 2 linear obstacles and I have chosen to use my full speed move segment. Because I've used the full speed move segment and crossed 2 linear obstacles, I take 2 fatigues. Had I chosen to, I could have moved at half speed and not taken any fatigue hits. The second regiment's only crossed 1 at full speed and has therefore taken 1. The third regiment hasn't crossed any linear obstacles yet, therefore it has no fatigues. Here we can see the artillery battery's first move. Both artillery batteries started the game limbered and opted to tear down the rail fence that was in front of them. This took half a segment. Whilst the batteries are limbered, they are allowed 3 move segments, each of 9 inches. The tearing down of the fence used up 1/2 of one segment. Therefore, the artillery has actually used up 2 segments. Half to tear down the fence, half a segment to move, and then 1 full segment to limber on the second fence line in a position to shoot. In contrast to the Texas Brigade earlier, this South Carolina regiment's chosen to move at half a segment speed. Therefore, it could cross the linear obstacle and not suffer any fatigue hits. Over on my right flank, the Mississippi regiments who are moving in open line could have moved a lot further, but as they are aiming to defend that wooded area, they chose to move very little. Right, now we've completed the player A, the Confederate move, we have an option to rally. As the Texas Brigade picked up most of the fatigue hits through crossing the fences, my brigade commander is now going to attempt to rally. He has a control factor of 3 and a command range of 16. Therefore, each of his battalions are within his command range. He's going to choose to spend 2 of his available 3 dice rallying the front battalion. To rally that battalion, he needs to roll less than that battalion's current fatigue score. The current fatigue score of the battalion is 9 minus the 2 fatigue hits, making it a 7. It does get some bonuses. It gets +1 from the general because his inspiration factor is +1, and it gets an additional +1 because it's outside of 12 inches of any enemy. He needs to roll 9 or less. After making the commander's rolls for the front battalion, you can see he's rolled a 4 and he's rolled a 10. Sadly, the 10 is greater than 9, so that fails to rally a fatigue. The 4 is less than 9, and therefore it will rally a fatigue. The commander had 3 dice, he's used 2, it leaves him 1 more dice to use. He's going to use that to try and rally the 2nd battalion, which is on 1 fatigue. Again, its current fatigue score is used, which is 9 minus 1 to 8. He's got +1 for his inspiration factor and +1 again for there being no enemy within 12. Therefore he will rally unless he rolls a 0. Okay, it's now going to move over to side B for their firing phase. There was no defensive fire and there was no close combat to be had. The only units that are going to be firing from the Union side are the 2 artillery batteries that were deployed at the start of the game. Artillery has an arc of fire equal to the width of its frontage. Therefore, most artillery targets will be firing directly ahead. Directly ahead of the 1st Union battery is the deployed Confederate battery behind the fence. To calculate the firing score needed by the Union artillery to score a hit, we start with the battery's fatigue score and add and subtract tactical modifiers to get an end result. In both cases for the Union artillery, they are medium rifled bore artillery pieces. They have a short range of 20 inches. Sadly, or fortunately, the distance to the targets is around 21 inches. Therefore they are at long range. The factors that they get start with their basic 8. We add 2 to this for them being rifled. They get this bonus at any range because of being rifled. Both of their targets are obscured. This gives them both a -2, which again leaves them back to 8. We always play in the rules. The first shot at any new target is slightly more difficult, so they suffer a -1 penalty for that. This leaves them on a final firing fatigue score of 7. Should they roll 7 or less, they will score a hit on their target. Because it is over short range, they can only ever score 1 hit. After rolling the dice to hit, we see the Union player has rolled a 2 and a 3, successfully scoring 1 hit on each of the target units. Had these dice rolls been made at short range, then each would have scored 2 fatigue hits on the targets. The hits just scored are recorded by the Confederate player on the fatigue board. The artillery battery, which belonged to the 1st Brigade, has now dropped from 23 to 22. The South Carolina Infantry Battalion, which is part of Brigade 2, has now dropped from 15 to 14. These fatigue hits are never recovered. I'd now like to talk about small arms firing. The game's moved on and the Texas Battalion has moved into a supported line formation, and it's going to shoot the supported line formation of the Union troops directly to its front. To calculate the firing fatigue score of the Confederates, we take our initial 9. We're carrying 1 fatigue hit already, which makes it 8. Added to that, we have tactical and situational factors. In this case, the Confederate unit will get +1 for being at short range, it will get +1 for having rifled weapons, and it will count a further +2 for being in supported line formation. Gives it a total of 12. As the factor that we need has gone over the 10, we roll 2 dice. 1 against a factor of 10, 1 against a factor of 2. The first dice you roll is the 2. This was a 7 and is therefore a miss. We then roll our 10, which is a 6. That is sufficient to score 1 hit. Add the die roll of 6 being a 4, we can see from the table that would have scored 2 hits. Add the roll being a 1 or a 2, it would have scored 3 hits. We now move further along our battle line to the first of our South Carolina veteran units. These are going to shoot at the Irish advancing to the front. As these are a veteran unit, the initial fatigue score is 11. Minus the 2 fatigues that they're carrying gets them to a 9. To this 9 we then had the tactical and situational factors that apply. In this case, the South Carolina regiment has short range, giving it 1 bonus. It has rifled muskets for a second one, and as they are lining the fence they can count rested weapons for a total of +3 to their 9. Therefore they're on 12. Once again, as we've gone over 10, they're all 2 dice. First against the 2, which scores a hit in this case, and then once against the 10, which scores a further hit. It's now the turn of the Confederate artillery to fire, and they've got a target directly in front of them. Both artillery units are carrying no fatigue, and both are on a factor of 7. At this range, being smoothbores, they will fire canister, which is worth +6. So both batteries are on a fatigue score of 13. In addition to this, canister always scores 1 fatigue hit. Before we roll the dice for the 2 batteries, therefore the Union regiment to the front has taken 2 fatigue hits. We then roll our dice, and they are separate dice. So there is the first one at 3, which misses. The second one for that battery, which is against a 10, which scores 1. We then move to the second battery, rolling its 3, which scores 1, and then it rolls against its 10 for a 2, which scores 3 more fatigues. From that round of firing at close range from the smoothbore artillery, the Union regiment has taken 7 fatigue hits. Are added to the 2 that the unit is already carrying, which exceeds its starting fatigue score, therefore that unit is removed